Hey, everybody, it's Ryan. Thanks for downloading today's show. And just a reminder, as always, Wake Up War Chant is brought to you by our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central and Township, in the heart of College Town. That's right, ladies and gentlemen, from Tallahassee to Thomasville, and from coast to Atlantic coast, it's time to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio, and it's a very happy, well, as happy as it can be, Wednesday morning, October the 11th, to you and yours. You're currently listening to the voice of Ryan Kelly. I'm the director of digital media at warchant.com, Drew Hicken, sitting on the other side of the glass, making things work, producing the show for us today. Drew, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm alive, and sometimes that's all you can ask, because I hate to make this statement at the top of a morning drive sports talk show, but it's really hard to be a sports fan in America right now. Really, really hard, especially when you're a Florida State football fan. When you're a Mets fan like you are, or a Tigers fan like I am, and you're watching October play out, and you had grand illusions that maybe your team could be there playing in it. And, well, the U.S. men's national team's going to miss the World Cup for the first time since either of us have been alive. I was 7 years away from being born, 1993. Starting the 1986 World Cup, which was the last to not feature the United States. It's insane to me. Absolutely insane. And I get it. Soccer's not everybody's thing. I'm going to move on from this in a second, but it's just bugging me. And here's the thing. I'm not a huge soccer nerd. Like, I'm not going to sit down and watch a ton of the World Cup without the United States in it, but it's such a cool thing that we all kind of get to do together, and it's fun to root on our boys and have those kind of days off from work and all that, and we're not going to have that as a country anymore, at least not until 2022, and that sucks. It really sucks. So that's just kind of where I'm at today. And I'm sorry, the first segment of the show is a little bit of a downer, too. But we're going to get to some better stuff. Gene Williams is going to join us later on the show. I was able to have a conversation with him last night. So I was able to talk to him in the home studio over the Skype line. So you'll hear from him a little bit later. But for now, thanks so much for waking up with us here at 6 a.m. on 97.9 ESPN Radio, or streaming over your mobile devices, the TuneIn Radio app, the WTSM app, ESPNTallahassee.com, or a podcast, iTunes, Podcast Republic, or chantradio.com, YouTube, however it is. Rate and subscribe. You'll be glad you did if you like the show, and it helps us out, helps you out, Radio at warchant.com. There's your email address. At Wake Up War Chant's your Twitter account. I believe we are playing the Renegade Express tomorrow. We are going to push that on out with Mr. Irish Affel, if we can get him sometime today. So that's good. We're also working on talking to some hoops guys with you, hopefully here in the next day or so. But if not, then definitely going to do that next week. There's so much stuff to get to. And, of course, we always thank you for doing it. And we know that it's not possible without our friends at For the Table, Madison Social, Central, and Township, all there in the heart of College Town. And, of course, now the Soto Bakery right there in the heart of Midtown. So you have to put that game behind you. Florida State-Miami is no more. It stays on your record, but it can't stay in your mind because you kind of have a streak to protect, and you have to go on a streak here against these next four games. Duke, Louisville, Boston College, Syracuse now becomes the softest part of your schedule. And I would say that if you want to get this back on track, you got to go 4-0. I don't think they go 4-0. I think they probably go 3-1 and lose to Louisville. But you know what? I've been wrong before. So we'll see what this team can do. However, I think more important than anything is the mental state of this football team. We got to talk to a couple different players yesterday. We got to talk to Nooney Murray, and we also got to talk to Tavares McFadden. And I readied a clip of Tavares McFadden for you that you know what? I'll just let him speak for himself and just kind of the subtext and the context. Just listen to where T-Mac is at right now.
A lot of people took that to heart, including me. But we got to go back to practice, get better every day, and finish the season strong.
How do you guys fix the small things? And would it be easier if it was like one big breakdown, or is it more frustrating with some of the small things?
A lot of the things is not so much what we what we call, what we plan. You know, we just got to make the plays when they come.
Tavares, I guess, what kind of went wrong for you on that play?
I mean, good defense, better throw and catch.
What are some things that have you kind of gotten advice for any coaches or any players to kind of get past this point?
You know, a lot of people just say it happens to the best. You know, adversity gonna come. You know, playing corner, you know, that's the hardest position on the field. So, you know, that's just a moment and a play that I got to make in the time that my team need me.
Derwin said that you seemed pretty happy at practice yesterday. Like you were trying to put it behind you. Is that kind of where you're at right now?
You know, I can't dwell on the past. You know, we got a good Duke team coming up this week, and you know, I just got to get ready for that game now.
Mm-hmm. What was the biggest adjustment Miami made on you guys from first half to second half offensively? Their offense.
I don't know. Like I said, it was just some plays that was left on the field that we should have made, and the times that we needed to make them.
What jumps out at you when you see Duke on film?
Duke is a great team. You know, they're very disciplined. You know, good coaching. They play hard, and you know, we got to be on our P's and Q's this week too.
Let's go 2 more.
When you guys have breakdowns on zone coverage, is it communication? Is it just finding a soft spot in the zone? Specifically in the Miami game, there were those 2 instances that happened.
Guys just got to put their eyes in the right place and do their job.
Has Jimbo instructed you guys anymore on staying away from social media and trying not to buy into frustration?
Nah, you know, we got our social media ban going on during the season anyway, so, you know, that shouldn't be a problem.
Yeah. You know, maybe I'm not the biggest body language or whatever expert, but Tavares McFadden didn't seem to be in a great mood. Nyquan Murray didn't seem to be in a great mood. Ermin Lane didn't seem to be in a great mood. And I don't expect a 1-3 team to be. But, of course, he is to take those questions about the catch. Ermin Lane takes a lot of questions about Charles Kelly. Nooney Murray takes a lot of questions about, hey, buddy, where were you? And it just kind of gets to the point where I just wonder about this team mentally. And I know that's something that's been brought up before, but we just haven't been able to talk about it in depth on this show, is that you really hope this team worries about its draft stock, because that's about the only thing they got to play for at the moment. It's that and to keep a bowl streak alive, because you could tell how upset they were that they lost that streak to Miami, that it meant so much to them. And now, I don't want to say they're on the outside looking in from a lot of Florida State teams, but you can tell there's kind of a sense of, hey, what's left? Where do we go from here? When you got to chat with those players yesterday.
Yeah, Tavares McFadden seems pretty dejected. I'm pretty sure the entire team was devastated by that loss, as were all of us. It was a tough game, and you know, I think that regardless of how things had gone so far, I think there was a big confidence that regardless of what the outside people thought about this football game, I think that locker room really felt like they were going to beat Miami. And I think they thought, regardless of how the first 3 games had gone, this is where we get it back on track. We go, 9-2, 8-3, and it is what it is. But we'll see. I agree with you. I brought it up a little bit the past couple of days. I'm a little worried about what they have left to play for. Florida State, the thing is that I don't see this team quitting, but I do think they need a couple more wins under their belts. As a fan, I would worry about this Duke game on Saturday, not necessarily as a loss, but I'm telling you right now, you could lose this football game if you go in there sleepwalking with a bad attitude. So I think he's right. They need to be on their P's and Q's. You know, Duke's not necessarily the best team on your schedule, but they're fully capable of beating you. But, you know, we'll see where this team's at, you know, and people like Nooney Murray are going to have to step up, especially with, it looks like, it's not confirmed, but it doesn't exactly look great for Keith Gavin to play on Saturday. And Auden's still banged up, and it's just people are going to have to step up. It's not, hey, Nooney, where were you for the Miami game? Hey, Nooney, where have you been the entire season? And Tavares, I feel for him having to field all these questions about that because he's right. At the end of the day, what went wrong on the play? Good defense, better throw and catch. It was a great throw and catch. It's not Tavares' fault we were there in that situation, but I thought it was a little interesting how he brought up that there were plays that were left on the field that should have been made. And I don't know if a lot of people remember it, but my mind goes back to when, right before Miami kicked a field goal, Tavares McFadden had a chance to pick the ball off at about the 1, and he dropped it. And I wonder if that's kind of what he was referring to. I'm sure there's others that he's alluding to as well. But that's just something to think about.
So those missed opportunities, and we're going to talk about that with Gene Williams in a little bit, that have separated this Florida State team from the others. When you play these close games, when you get in these close moments, Florida State has always kind of played with the belief under Jimbo Fisher that they're going to get that turnover, that they're going to get that stop, that whatever was gone wrong is going to eventually go right. And that's sometimes when you do that in these 50-50 ball games can be a fool's errand. Because when you play with fire long enough, you're going to get burned. And I'm with you. This is a tough game this weekend. That's a well-coached Duke team, and that's a Duke team that you're maybe catching at the right time. I will give you that. Duke, of course, starts out with a 4-0 start. 0-2 since then. Gets throttled by Miami, gets shut down by Virginia and Charlottesville, and now you've got Florida State coming up. But the thing is, if you're Duke, and from here on out, all the teams that you consider the quote-unquote lower caliber teams in the ACC, Duke, Boston College, Syracuse, you know what this is? This is lost decade blood in the water all over again. 05, 06, 07, times like that when Florida State would roll into Charlottesville or Florida State would roll into, Raleigh, and those teams that weren't that great at the time would be licking their chops because they know, get it in now while they're bad. Get it in now while we can. This can be the victory. This can be the W over Florida State. Bad times are here again, and I'm here to tell you that those teams on that schedule that you consider inferior are licking their chops at the chance that maybe, just maybe, this is the year they can upend Florida State.
Yeah, I don't know. I get what you're saying. I wouldn't necessarily. Yeah,
I'm not saying that it's gonna happen,
right?
But what I am saying is, you better bring your A game every single week that you think you can quote unquote sleepwalk through one of these. They're going to bring their A game and then some because they've seen it's possible.
Right. I think a lot of, and you've seen a couple of players say, I think a lot, especially for a lot of the young guys, getting every team's best shot every week, regardless of how good you are, just because you're Florida State, is something that I think a lot of the young guys had to get used to, and they will. And I'll say another thing. I'm really, really interested to see if Keith Gavin, in fact, does not play on Saturday. Guys like Tamarian Terry and DJ Matthews, will they get some playing time? Will they get to step up and make some plays? Really interested to see something like that. I really want to see DJ Matthews on the field. I know he got injured in camp, and I know that set him back quite a bit, and that's kind of why we haven't seen him too much yet. But I really want to see him out there because I feel like he's a guy who can make a difference. And when you saw the two number 29s on the kickoff return of the final play of the game against Miami, he was the 29 who returned that kick. And again, not to be crazy here, but I kind of, for a second there, he gave me a little bit of hope.
There was about that second or two where you thought, is there a way?
He broke that tackle, and I thought maybe if he bounced it to the outside, I was like, oh my God. I mean, all hope was virtually lost. Your hope was invested in that somehow they were going to overturn that touchdown. But as you continued to look at the replay with, again, no pylon camera, you knew there was no way they were going to overturn that. Could you
imagine, though, in that football game, if they turned that all the way back and either A, the penalty is called that there are two 29s on the field, or B, there is no call that there are two 29s on the field.
Right.
Either way, you have a fan base leaving that place furious.
Right.
Either the coaching staff or an officiating crew.
Or even think about, that call, too. Even think about what if they overturn Miami's touchdown. Then all of a sudden, because Miami ran onto the field before knowing if it was exactly a touchdown or not, they get that 15-yard penalty, and they have They have 6 seconds left. They had to blow a timeout to keep the runoff from going, and they're on the 16. So all of a sudden, they just won the football game, and then you still got to make a 30-something yard field goal just to take it to overtime. Those were 2 big calls on the last 2 plays of the game. But yeah, I think you're right. Imagine if DJ takes that to the house and there's a flag for 2. We'd be having not an entirely different conversation because there's a lot of heat on the coaching staff already. But if Florida State had lost that game because there were 2 number 29s on the field, people would be asking for heads to roll right now. I mean, it would be pandemonium, I think, if something like that had happened.
Let me just say that I'm with you. I'm excited to see some of these younger guys. I hate that here for what seems like the thousandth year in a row, injuries have turned into opportunity for youngsters. But DJ Matthews and even DeMurray and Terry, I want to see what he can do. You need another big physical guy, and I'm not saying he's going to be ready right away. But what I am saying is if you put him in as a freshman every now and then, maybe he can give you some flashes of brilliance. You brought him in as a raw talent. Let him be just that against teams that you think you have a shot against. Let him be a raw talent because it's very, very clear that right now your big physical threat in Keith Gavin is probably not playing. It's very, very clear that your other big physical threat in Auden Tate is playing through an incredible amount of pain. Just see what you got. At this point, if it gives you a chance to win, go do it. And I think Jimbo Fisher will, because that's the thing. We can say what we want about Jimbo Fisher in terms of he doesn't let young guys get on the field enough. He doesn't this, he doesn't that. When his back is against the wall and he feels he has to, he will.
Yeah, and I think that's a thing too. We talked about it a little bit the last couple of days, and how when you're on Miami's 37-yard line, you punt the ball away and you don't take those chances because what do you have to lose? What do you have to lose now? You're 1-3. You just lost to Miami. You're not making the ACC championship game. Spoiler alert. You're not going to a New Year's Six. You're not going to the playoff. You don't have a lot to lose. If you go up and call the same passive type of game and you don't let freshmen get reps when it's only going to benefit your future teams, I think that's what you have to start. That's what this team has to start thinking about. Let's build those momentum to the future. Let's not let this be a catastrophic season. If you go 8-3 and 7-4, it's a disappointing year, but it's nothing. You're still going to a bowl game. You had a true freshman quarterback. You started 1-3. You weathered the storm. You finished strong. That would be okay. I mean, not okay, but we talked about it, when Francois got hurt, you said, okay, well, you can't necessarily point out the losses other than Clemson on this schedule, but they're out there because when you have a true freshman quarterback, it just there's losses there. It just, what games are they going to be? So it's the same thing, it's about the expectations you had to expect the second that this happened. So if they're still able to do that and not let this be a 4-7 type year, all things considered, I would say that would show good character in a football team.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, like I said, there's more disappointment to get to and actually a really cool sports story to get to. Let's get you caught up on everything that happened last night. This is why you were sleeping.
Hello. Good morning. Wake up. Wake up. Wake me up. Good morning. Good morning.
What happened last night?
All right, the United States men's national team falls 2-1. I already talked about that. At Trinidad and Tobago, World Cup's not happening. That's a thing. Of course, other things in CONCACAF had to happen for that. It was the absolute perfect storm. It all happened within minutes of each other. Mexico ends up losing its game. Costa Rica ends up losing its match. The United States ends up losing to Trinidad and Tobago, who had lost 9 matches straight and had 6 points throughout the entire World Cup qualifying process, and now isn't going to the World Cup. Burn it down. Bruce Arena should be Lane Kiffin. He should be left on the tarmac in a foreign country and told, find yourself a win. Cool story, though, out of the NHL last night. Of course, it was the first home game for the Vegas Golden Knights, and it was really a somber moment if you get a chance to see that on TV, as Vegas paid tributes to the victims of the attack. earlier this month. It was really somber, and it turned into something really cool as the Golden Knights exploded for 4 goals in the first period. This is an expansion team now. And granted, they were playing the Coyotes. The Coyotes are terrible. But exploded for 4 goals within the first 10 minutes of this game, 3 within the first 7. If you were watching on TV, you thought the roof was going to get blown off that place. But the Golden Knights end up winning that game 5-2, the first ever NHL expansion team to be 3-0 through their first 3 games, and believe it or not, lead the Pacific Division. Elsewhere in hockey, it's 3-1 Blues over the Rangers, 2-1 Blue Jackets over the Canes, 3-1 the Blackhawks beat the Canadiens, 6-5 the Predators win their opener at home over the Flyers, 4-2 the Dallas Stars over the Red Wings in Dallas, 3-2 the Senators go on the road and beat the Canucks, and, well, don't look now, but we're about to get a little bit more baseball. Of course, Cubs-Nats, it was postponed, but we'll get it soon. When we come back, we're talking a little bit more about college football as a whole. We haven't really had a chance to talk about that all this week. So we're going to get that right after this. This is Wake Up 410 on 97.9 ESPN Radio. So, only a short little time before we get to Gene Williams here on Wake Up 410, 97.9 ESPN Radio. I just have a couple quick questions for you, Drew. And we'll stay in the state first of all. Is UCF the best team in Florida?
Probably. They probably are. I wouldn't have a whole ton of confidence if UCF played Florida State on Saturday.
I was about to say let's just make it a neutral site. Let's say Miami, who just beat Florida State, plays UCF at Raymond James Stadium, a neutral site for both of them. I think Central Florida wins.
Yeah, I don't know. I just, again, I see how you can make the argument, and I guess just off the top of your head, I would say Central Florida really might be the best team. But it's still, in my mind, I can't get out of the UCF narrative that they're still UCF. So I would say Miami would probably win the football game. But, I mean, UCF is, from where they've come, just a year ago to now, it's remarkable.
It really is. And, Scott Frost is going to, if he wants the Nebraska job and Nebraska wants him, I mean, that's going to be his. Let's face it, there's no doubt about it. But this is just, man, look at the top 10 right now. This is a really weird year for college football. Auburn, Ohio State, Washington State, Wisconsin, TCU, Washington, Penn State back in the top 10, Georgia back in the top 10, and then kind of Alabama and Clemson standing alone right now. However, can I just say something? I'm not so sure, and I know I'm sticking my neck out when I say this. I know they do it every single year. If somebody can beat Alabama or Clemson in the top 10, it's Georgia. That defense is the real deal. The absolute real deal. And I'll be the first to tell you, I doubted the Kirby Smart hire. For all I know, it could still go south 3-4 years from now. Saban assistant plus SEC job usually does not equal success. But that defense is legit. They're recruiting well. They have themselves a quarterback. They just committed themselves another quarterback. Kirby's got that thing rolling. I'm impressed.
Yeah, I agree that they're doing well. They haven't necessarily played a whole lot of anybody yet, so I'm kind of interested to see how that goes when they play a really good football team.
I think you could also make the argument though, who really has Alabama played that's super impressive? I mean, you're hanging your hat on what? The Florida State win? Florida State's won 3.
Alabama's winning games 59-0, except for that Texas A&M game.
And Georgia's pretty flat running through people too.
And Alabama's Alabama, and Georgia is Georgia. So that's what I'm hanging my hat on.
I don't disagree, buddy, but man, look at these results.
And I know you're saying that. I know everyone's talking about Fromm, and they are winning with Fromm, but Fromm at the end of the day is throwing for 100 yards a week. I think in a lot of ways that's what Justin Fields sees is this team's success, and he looks and he said, this kid, they won 41-0 last week, and this kid threw for 84 yards. I think he thinks that he can come in there and win that job. I know a lot of people talk about, why would Justin Fields go there with Eason and Fromm? I just think he thinks he's better than both of them.
Yeah, Fromm against Vandy, 7 of 11, 102 yards, 2 touchdowns. Sony Michel, 150 yards on 12 carries, 1 touchdown. You look at the week before that, 2 weeks before that, Mississippi State. It's from 9 of 12, 201 yards, 2 touches. You look at that game against Tennessee they played a week ago. 7 of 15, 84 yards, 1 touch, 1 pick. They still won 41-0. They've kind of found, you know what it's kind of like watching? It's like watching Jacksonville. It's literally like watching Jacksonville. Kirby may not have the most confidence in either of those quarterbacks, but he knows Fromm's going to make better decisions rather than not when he's behind the sticks. He knows he's got elite running backs. He can run the football, and he can rely on his defense. And so far, it's worked. And in the SEC East, it's always going to work. I mean, if they don't beat Florida this year, they should shut the program down.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest. I haven't watched a ton of Georgia. I watched them against Notre Dame and was really not that impressed because I didn't think Notre Dame was that good of a football team at the time. Turns out Notre Dame's not as bad as
Notre Dame's decent. They're in 25.
Notre Dame's not as bad as I originally thought. But, again, will they beat Florida? Let's see. They typically just can't get that done. And I know maybe that was a Mark Richt thing. Who knows? But that maybe, like I said, when they start playing some better teams, I am in no way saying that I don't think they could beat Alabama. I don't think they're on that level yet. I do think that they're heading in the right direction. I think you could make the argument they're kind of doing the same thing that Miami's doing. I think that they're going in the right way. But at the end of the day, I don't think they're. And again, this is me saying I haven't watched enough of their football games, so I can't really say that for sure. I'm just saying that I think in a lot of ways they're more moving in the right direction, as is Miami. But is Georgia back? In my mind, probably not.
I'm not telling you straight up they'd beat the Tide today, but what I'm saying is I'd take them before Penn State could, or Washington could, or TCU could, or Wisconsin, or Wazoo, or the Buckeyes, or Auburn.
Yeah, I would take Penn State over them for sure.
All right. You do you. We'll find out. Gene Williams joins us next. This Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio.
Yes, Florida State just landed a 5-star commitment.
I don't see that anywhere online. How did you get that news so fast?
I'm on the new warchant.com app. I get news updates and scores pushed to my phone instantly.
How much does it cost?
It's free. Just go to iTunes or the Google Play Store, type in Warchant, and install it on your phone. That's it.
A free app that keeps me constantly up to date on Florida State sports and recruiting? Wow, that makes it incredibly easy to follow my Seminoles and never miss out.
With the app, you'll also get quick access to all the stories and features on Warchant, including the ever-popular message boards that feature thousands of fans talking about the Noles.
Warchant.com, your ultimate Seminole source.
Welcome back to Wake Up War Chant here on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Ryan Kelly here, and joining us on the Skype line, Mr. Gene Williams, the founder and administrator of warchant.com. Boss man, how are you, sir?
I'm just fine, man. Getting myself all ready for that, wonderful game against Duke. We love it up there.
Another nooner, baby. You better get. Yeah. That was my favorite thing when we recorded the War Chant report yesterday. Is that as soon as Jeff read it was a noon kickoff, he said, "Get used to him, because you better."
Yeah.
I know.
Well, there's one primetime guaranteed left. Of course, that is the BC game, but that'll probably be the only one.
Yeah, hey, a Friday night in Chestnut Hill, baby. Get a little snug, a little cozy. It's not like there's any. Red Sox baseball's already over, so you don't have that to compete with. The Patriots are probably playing on Sunday that week. You're the only game in town and the biggest sports market in the world, unless the Bruins are playing.
I think soccer is actually bigger in Boston than the Eagles are. Sorry to say it, but
I don't know. You seen New England Revolution attendance? It ain't great.
I don't know. I've seen in this little story getting off the path. The first time BC played in the ACC, people may remember FSU kind of opened their debut. It was a big primetime matchup there. And I remember opening up the Boston Globe in the morning, Saturday morning, having my breakfast, getting ready to read all about it, see what the locals were saying about the Noles, and had to go to about page 8 of the sports to even find reference to it. And there was a bigger soccer story that was in front of the Boston college game. So that kind of told me all I need to know about the Boston market for college sports.
Yeah, fair enough. But Anyway, there's a lot to dive into, and there's so much that's happened just over the last couple days, but I did want to focus on, I know you put out your 5 takes column earlier on in the week, and we got to talk on a couple of different things that you touched on in our post-game podcast, so if you didn't have a chance, go back and listen to that. However, I did want to talk to you about this. You kind of closed out the article kind of searching for positives. What are the good things you can take away from FSU Miami? And I'm not trying to be a spin doctor because we've spent plenty of time this week talking about the problems and the issues around Florida State right now. But if you had to take something good away from the first month and a half of this season, what is it?
Well, and I'll regurgitate a couple of things I put in the 5 takes, and I'll throw something else out there too. But I think, obviously, the play of a couple freshmen. We saw Cam. We really, for the first time, we got little glimpses, I think, the first couple games about Cam Akers. But we really saw him on full display, what he can do when he's fully focused in and he realizes he has to run north-south. It isn't high school anymore. Take that ball, be vicious with it, go ahead, use your ability. And we really saw that. I mean, he went against – this was a really good Miami defense. I mean, that front seven is as good as anybody in the country. And he ran for whatever it was, 138-something yards against them and looked good doing it. Was breaking tackles. And you can see what the upside for this kid. So that was really exciting to me to see him kind of break out. And then I was really encouraged by James Blackman. After he threw that pass to Ryan Izzo, it looked like he was completely dialed in. I mean, obviously he completed 8 for 8 after that pass and led Florida State to 2 straight touchdowns there down the stretch, which we thought it looked like at the time was going to be the game winner there at the end. Of course, we didn't count on the defense completely melting down. And we've talked about it here, Ryan. You've talked about it on your show and the War Chant Report. Can't say enough about Auden Tate. Man, that kid is tough. He's kind of like last year, DeAndre Francois. It's fighting through everything and just keep coming back. You can tell he's playing on one shoulder and just to go out, not only go out and play, but make play after play. When it's counted on, when there's a big play that's needed, he's always the guy there for it. So props to him. Another thing I want to get into and really touch on it there, we get so caught up in the record, and rightfully so. It's Florida State. They were preseason number 3, supposed to win the ACC, and all that's gone after 4 games. But it's kind of crazy to me to look at the fact, you lost your starting quarterback in the first game, and we knew that was the one position you couldn't handle it. What was the other position you lacked depth as wide receiver? You get Phillips kicked off the team. You got Keith Gavin now is probably out for Saturday. You've had guys banged up, and it's just a lot of bad luck. And then 2 of those 3 games really could have gone either way. If you don't get screwed by the officials against NC State and a bunch of weird bounces don't go your way, you probably win that game. And, it came down to a final play against Miami. You could very easily be sitting here at 3-1. And I know that's a Jimbo Fisher mantra, an inch away, a play here or there, but it really is true. There's such a fine line. But at the same point, I'll say, so people don't say I'm trying to be too rosy with things. They could just as easily be 0-4 right now. So it is amazing how close this team is to being actually pretty good as opposed to being 1-3.
Well, Gene, and I'll counterpoint you a little bit with it's a little something we discussed on yesterday's show, and that's the idea that literally since 2014, and I know this is not the first time we've discussed this, but since 2014, Florida State has loved to live dangerously. Granted, against some teams that they should play close games that they should have to squeak out. But even the games against teams that they're far more talented than, like a Wake Forest, they have liked to joke around and pal around and look up at the scoreboard in the fourth quarter and think, oh boy, we got to win this game. And they've lived dangerously literally for 4 years now as a program. The thing is, though, for all of 2014 outside of Oregon, they got away with it. Most of 2015, they got away with it. Late in 2016, they got away with it. Florida State has played with fire for almost half a decade now, and I think what you're finally seeing over this first half of the season is they've gotten burned. They've played with fire, and they've gotten burned, and now you pay the price for it because you can't continually get into those 50-50 games and think you're going to win them more than 50% of the time.
Yeah, that's a good point. I think about that. Yeah, going back to the amount of times they've trailed in games going back to that 2014. Now, I don't think any season will ever match 2014, which is ridiculous. You knew you were going down by 2-3 touchdowns regardless of who you played in the first half. But this is not – you see Alabama blowing people out. If there's a team they should win, if it's Vanderbilt, they go and beat them by 50. Florida State, if they're going to beat Wake Forest, it's going to be 17-16 or whatever that was last year's score. This year where you barely squeak by. And you shouldn't be doing that. First of all, it's, you're going to, like you said, play with fire too many times. You're getting burned on some of those games. You're losing some of those you shouldn't lose now. And I also think long term, you're missing the opportunity to get younger guys in there. You go watch Alabama by middle of the third quarter, they got all these other 5-stars that are big-time recruits. They're in there getting meaningful playing time. So when you have a situation when they lose, 11 guys to the NFL, it's not that big a deal because these guys have seen significant playing time the year before. When every single game goes down to the wire, you're wearing out your starters, which we saw a little bit, I think, at the end of that Miami game where it seemed like some of the defenders were a little gassed. And you're not giving those younger guys meaningful reps. You're not seeing as much as the Kandos, the Marvin Wilsons, those guys that we want to see out in the field, the Nazardines, who are going to be your future star. It'd be nice because they're maybe starting next year if they get meaningful reps this year, and they're not getting it right now.
Obviously, if you got to turn this thing around, you got to do it quick, and it all starts with the team that you've never lost to, the Duke Blue Devils up in Durham. The last time that Florida State went on the road to Duke, they were in somewhat of a similar situation after sliding, of course, losing to Oklahoma, Clemson, and Wake Forest back to back to back. Florida State gets out of it, and there was some doubt about how they would play in Duke and how they would go against the Duke Blue Devils. They were able to come out of that game and perform decently well. But, Gene, you got to start this far sooner rather than later if you're going to get out of what right now you even put in your 5 takes column, arguably one of the 5 most disappointing seasons ever at Florida State.
Yeah, it was interesting when I did that. I was kind of surprised there weren't more disappointing seasons. I'm not talking about bad records or anything like that. I'm talking about what your expectations were versus what you got on the field. And to be preseason number 3, and we're sitting here talking about there's no goals left and whether or not you're going to be bowl eligible. I think unless there's some ridiculous, miraculous finish to the season, this is going to be the most disappointing season in Florida State history. It almost has to be. And you're right. You go back to that 2011 season. Boy, that was weird, too, to see FSU lose 3 in a row. And you kind of got it against Oklahoma and Clemson. But, yeah, that game against Wake Forest was that was a tough one up there. But, yeah, you're right. They bounced when they played really well against Duke and went on to have a pretty decent season, obviously. And then to finish out beating Florida and Ben Hill Griffin, and then to go ahead and beat, I think it was Notre Dame. That was the one when they started basically the whole freshman offensive line, which kind of was the beginning of that great offensive line in 2013. They started getting all the reps in that bowl game, I remember. So, yeah, you had such a positive feeling after that season. I don't know if we're going to have a similar result this time around. I can't see Florida State Duke being the springboard for a really positive season, but we'll see. I still think kind of absolute best case scenario is a 4-loss season. I think anybody in Garnet Gold would take a 4-loss season right now if you could have it.
Yeah, I don't expect to turn around quite to that extent, but you do know that you have some workable games ahead of you. I know you're convinced that Louisville's a very winnable game. Maybe me not quite as convinced, but, I mean, Duke, Louisville, Boston College, Syracuse, if you're going to make a run at salvaging this season, these are the 4 games you got to do it in and build yourself some confidence to where maybe even if you don't think you can beat Clemson, you think you can have a respectable showing up there.
You really need to go into that Clemson game at 5-3. I think Ira brought up the scenario. Kind of if you lose one of these games, you could be sitting in a situation where you're 5-5 going into that Florida game, and who knows how the Gators could be 5-5 at that point, or whatever it is, 5-6, 6-5, whatever the deal is at that point. I mean, you could be playing for bowl eligibility. That matchup between Florida and Florida State, I never thought I'd see the day that both teams could potentially be that far down. It's crazy to think about, but yeah, if you're going to make a little bit of a run, there really isn't a soft part of this schedule, but this is certainly more winnable. You've got 3. I forgot to check. Is Louisville ranked after losing NC State, Ryan, or they drop off?
I do not believe that Louisville's in the top 25, but I'll look that up for you.
So, I mean, you should. Whether they are, they're barely in there, they're barely out. But anyway, you have more or less 4 teams that are unranked or 4 very winnable games in a row. And 4 games you'll probably be favoring everyone. Now, Louisville may be close to a pick-em, but you're definitely favored in the other 3 games. So, I mean, you really need to make a run right here. This is where you got to gain some momentum. You got to give James Blackman some confidence. That defense has to find itself. And the receiving core has to start getting more consistent, and that may consist of getting some younger guys out there. If the Nooney Murneys and George Campbells can't get the job done here, and they're going to have an opportunity big time this weekend because with Gavin out, if I'm Duke, I'm putting pretty much everybody on Auden Tate, and I'm not letting him beat me, so that means there'll be opportunities for some other receivers to make plays.
By the way, the Cards did drop out of both polls after being ranked 17th the week before. And another thing that I didn't realize, Gene, and not to rabbit trail here, but, the week before Florida State plays at Clemson, Clemson's got a date at Carter Finley Stadium.
That's interesting. Always going to the Wiz Palaces. We know that's a lot of fun. So yeah, they'll have a couple back-to-back games, and it's crazy to think that game between NC State and Clemson could potentially decide the Atlantic Division. And boy, are they going to be fired up in Carter Finley for that one.
And as much as we've talked about Clemson's schedule and the fact that they drew a really tough draw out of the Coastal, they played Louisville early. They scheduled Auburn. The toughest meat of Clemson's schedule is yet to come. I mean, these next 3 games that they're playing after their bye on October 21st and their date against Syracuse, why don't you try Georgia Tech at NC State and then Florida State?
Yeah, it doesn't seem as daunting, maybe, because Florida State, I mean, they got to be looking at Florida State and already putting that in the win column. I'm sorry. And Georgia Tech, I think, Paul Johnson, they're playing a little bit better right now. I don't know. I have a hard time believing they'll have much difficulty with that, especially at home. But, maybe looking a little bit ahead to NC State. Obviously, that'll be a big matchup. But it's not easy, but not as daunting as it could have been had Florida State been as good as we thought it was.
Gene, a final thought here. I know you titled your column, All Good Things Must Come to an End. And I have to ask you, do we ever see a streak in Florida State-Miami quite like the 7-game streak that we saw at the beginning of Jimbo Fisher's tenure, now that we can look back at it in retrospect?
Yeah, it was such an amazing run, 7 years. And I know poor Jeff Cameron, heartbroken at no Platinum Bohica. But, absent one of the teams getting in trouble, I have a hard time. Miami had to have a streak of not only getting in trouble with all the nonsense with Shapiro, they also had a string of very bad coaching hires back to back. So, it was a perfect storm down there. Now, I do think they're never going to be the dominant program they were in the 80s and 90s just because they just don't have the money and the facilities and the support that I think they need to be elite nowadays. But that doesn't mean they can't be really good and make a run against Florida State. So, but I do think absent some weird circumstances, I think this rivalry is going to start being a lot more even-handed for the next several years. So I think that the days of running 5, 6, 7 in a row, we may not see that again in our lifetime, Ryan.
Yeah, and here's the thing. Will Miami ever be a consistently elite program again? Probably not. I would tend to agree with you. 50 years from now, who's to say? But the thing is, it's hard for anybody to be consistently elite in college football anymore, outside of a very, very small handful of schools that have the money and the resources to compete many a time. And that's not to say Miami can't have elite years, because I certainly think they can, and they've got the coaching staff to do it. But to see that streak from what it was, and of course what started it, Jimbo Fisher's change, to Randy Shannon's failure at Miami, to Al Golden's failure at Miami, to those close games, to those blowouts, to all that, you're right. There's no better way of putting it rather than, no pun intended to any Miami fans that might be listening, but it was the perfect storm.
Yeah, it really was. And that's why I was always, all good things. It was great while it lasted, and FSU fans had a lot of fun. And it was kind of crazy to see. Miami fans knew this was their chance because you've been to enough Miami games at Florida State. Have you ever seen anywhere close to that Miami fans in Doak Campbell Stadium? I remember some years it seemed like there was 100, 200 fans in there, and they actually had a good turnout for this one. And they are let's face it, they're the ultimate bandwagon fans. When they're good, they somewhat show up for games. They suddenly come out of the woodworks, but when they're bad, and you've seen you've seen the empty stadiums, they absolutely have no fans at all. So, and again, I think that's another systemic problem they have, is not having an on-campus facility or an on-campus arena and not having really kind of a solid fan base like you have at most colleges.
Well, Gene, you mentioned it. All good things must come to an end, and so must this interview. Thanks as always, my friend.
Hey, thank you, Ryan. Have a good one.
All right, folks, we're putting a bow on it after this. It's Wake Up War Chant on 97.9 ESPN Radio. Oh, I love this story. Last week, a man named Bryant Johnson was arrested for public intoxication on Monday night, all the way up in Casper, Wyoming. But that's not the story, according to Johnson. Johnson had told police that he was from the year 2048, and he had been sent back to warn the town that aliens would be arriving in Casper next year. He reportedly told law enforcement that he was able to travel back to 2017, even though he said he meant to travel to 2018, because aliens filled his body with alcohol and had him stand on a giant pad to transport him into the past. This is a great story to cover up a public intoxication, except, listen, man, if you're warning of an alien invasion, you can't say it's the aliens that sent you back to the past. It's circular reasoning. It doesn't make sense. But I'll say this, as far as guys trying to get out of a public intoxication offense, that's about as good as an excuse gets. Drew, thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thanks to you guys for listening. Mike and Mike's up next. 97.9 ESPN Radio.
WarChant.com is the ultimate inside source for FSU football and recruiting. And now you can get in on the action for free for an entire month. WarChant.com is offering a risk-free 30-day trial subscription. Get full access to the #1 website covering the Seminoles just by entering the promo code WarChant30. That's WarChant30. Sign up and get in on the world's most active FSU message boards. Receive breaking news, stories from our award-winning staff, plus get exclusive interviews and videos. Just enter the promo code WarChant30. WarChant.com, your ultimate Seminole sports source.